Welcome to the Visibility Project Podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project Podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project Podcast.
Started by a group of citizens in a small Michigan town with a like-minded goal
of increasing the visibility
of the unseen and unheard populations in our community.
Our guests will share stories and insights
with the goal of increasing our awareness and knowledge
of various aspects of diversity and equity
to create a more connected, empathetic, and inclusive community.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
So, let's get to work.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
Welcome back to the Visibility Project Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremiah Lee. Spearheaded by the members of the Cultural Awareness Coalition, the project is the brainchild of several organizations and individuals with shared values who sit on a project steering team. We hope that the podcast series creates a deeper empathy for others and serves as a catalyst for people to actively create a more inclusive community and world.
In today's episode, we will hear about the older population's experiences living alone in senior apartments or assisted living facilities, especially during a pandemic. We found out that the gifts of connection, friendship, and time are priceless. As we emerge from isolation and into understanding one another, our guests speak plainly from the heart on the importance of creating bonds with others, regardless of our differences. Dr. Sasha Savage is a lifelong Michigander who enjoys sports and great food. He's been married to his wife, Heather, for 28 years, and they have 8 children, whom he counts as his best friends. He's a family physician and absolutely loves his job. Heather Savage is a native of California, but has enjoyed the 4 seasons of Michigan for the last 26 years. She has many hobbies, including volleyball, watching movies, and doing remodeling projects. She is married to Sasha and enjoys spending time with family. She recently started a new career teaching preschool. Shirley Debolt was raised on a farm in Michigan. She was married for 60 years to her late husband and has 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 11 great-grandchildren. She is a cancer survivor and currently lives in senior housing in Midland, Michigan.
Well, welcome, Shirley, Dr. Savage, and Heather. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you. So I'm going to start out with trying to get to know you a little bit better. So I will start with our star today, Shirley. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? You know, what's your background? What's your family life? Where do you live now? And just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Really not much to say. I'm from a family. I have 10 brothers and sisters. And I was married to a great man. I have 4 children. I live at Riverside Place right now. I never worked out as such. I just took care of the kids, but we did run our own business, and I did help my husband in that.
What kind of business did you guys run?
Engineering firm.
Oh, cool.
He placed men in Dow and different places. At one time, we had 150 working for us.
Wow.
And, of course, then he passed away, and then that changed my whole life. Mm. We'd have been married 60 years. He went 12 days before our 60th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
That's about it.
So how old are your kids?
That tells going to tell you how old I am.
I know. I was getting to that too, wasn't I? I was getting at that too.
Well, I got one 68, 66, 64, and 54.
Okay. Very cool.
10 years. I got to tell this because my mother was hung up on one of my nephews. She just thought the sun rose and set on him. So I thought, I'll snip his little nose, I'll have another baby. So I did. 10 years later, after my third one, I had Brian.
Yep.
And but it didn't snip his nose. She still preferred him to mine. So that didn't wind up too good.
That's funny.
And Brian was about, I never told you this, he was about probably 18 or 19, and we were all at a restaurant one night, and everybody was talking, and finally he just went, I was a mistake, wasn't I? I said, yeah, son, you was a mistake.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, thank you, Shirley. It's good. We're going to be digging a lot deeper into your story, but I'm going to go through. Dr. Savage, you're up next. Tell us a little about your background, what you do for work, what's your family and living life situation like, and
grew up in Kalamazoo.
Okay,
so I'm a Michigander. Have 2 younger sisters, and my mom and dad were folks who I think really tried to instill in all of us a sense of responsibility in the community. My dad worked with primarily the blind and deaf population, and so I spent a lot of time watching him teach people who couldn't see and couldn't speak and couldn't hear, almost Helen Keller-like.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was really neat. My mom did daycare out of our home, and the 2 of them were kind of what I call social pioneers. Like they saw a lot of the inequities that we deal with today long before they were ever called inequities. I was raised in what I thought was a normal environment. I look back, it was highly unusual, the amount of education that my parents gave me in terms of the differences in the world. So I think, even though I could not articulate it back then, that moved me to go into medicine.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I attribute that to my parents because they opened up my eyes to a much wider world than, dare I say, a little white boy from Kalamazoo, Michigan ever would have otherwise recognized. And so I went to school at Wayne State in Detroit, had an outstanding experience. Heather and I were just barely married at that time, and we had our oldest child. He was 9 months, I think, when we started there. We've since added 7 more, so we are the parents of 8 children.
Wow.
Yeah.
Coming from an only child, I'm like, oh, wow, I don't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah, I had always wanted a big family. With 2 sisters, I thought that was cool, but there was a part of me that wanted more. And so we had 8. And our house was crazy, as Heather could attest, but we loved it. And so I think also that really kind of gave me a lot of eyes on what do people experience raising a family. So as a family physician, because that's what I went into, I don't know, I had a lot of fun with it. And so I'm 22 years into my career now here at Mid-Michigan Health, and love what I do.
Excellent.
That's probably about all there is to me.
I'm sure there's a lot more, but and I see you have your better half here, Heather.
Yes, that is true.
Heather, same questions to you. Tell us more about your background and what do you do, and we've heard your family situation a bit. So, but what else? Maybe what are you passionate about? What gets you out of the bed in the morning?
Okay, well, the alarm clock gets me. Actually, now our new dog gets me out of bed in the morning. But what about me? Let's see. I was never going to get married or have children. I was going to teach PE in California, own a boat, and live by myself. That was my plan. Then I met Sasha, and all of that changed. So I did graduate to be a PE teacher, but never taught PE.
Okay.
And now I recently am going back to school to get some credit hours to become a preschool teacher.
Oh, very cool.
So I actually have been doing that this last year, and I will be the lead teacher, director of a preschool here in Midland starting next fall.
Congratulations.
So
that's awesome.
I am excited about that. I didn't realize how much I would love it, especially during COVID. Amazingly, 18 little people giving you a hug every day.
Can you raise those spirits?
Kind of pulled me through, yes. So didn't have the normal wintertime depression come on me. So anyway, yes, 8 children has been really fun. I grew up with 7 brothers and sisters. So when I met him and found out the rumor was he wanted 10 kids. And girls were like, get away from me. No, thank you. And I guess that didn't scare me as much because I came from a big family. But even still, I'm like, I'm not having 8 kids. You are out of your mind. So like Shirley said, Brian was the accident, right? We stopped at 6. I made it very clear. I am done. We are done. If you want more children, you might need to go find someone else to have another child. Ha ha, right? Anyway, so our number 7 was a surprise. Number 8 was not a surprise, surprisingly.
We knew number 7 needed a number 8.
That was kind of it, yeah.
Fair enough.
So,
well, as I said, I'm an only child. I think number 1 was a surprise. So. Awesome. Well, I'm going to shift gears and kind of put the spotlight on Shirley and Dr. Savage first and foremost. So can you both talk to me about your relationship first? Because it started out with a doctor-patient relationship. So can you speak about that relationship? How long have you known each other? Speak to that first and foremost. How long have you known each other? How long have you been her primary care physician? And what else, and other things?
Well, it can't be 30 because I've only been a doc. Well, she said 20 or 30.
Yeah.
I've only been a doc for 22.
Well, probably 20 years. I don't know, doctor.
I want to say it's been probably 15 plus.
It's still quite a bit of time, yeah.
Yeah, I was her son's doctor, Brian, the baby.
Yeah.
And I think it was Brian that got you into my clinic.
It was.
So I would tell this next story, but I think Shirley needs to tell it. The very first time I met her, I think it gives insight into the spunky nature.
You tell it.
No,
I got to hear it, Shirley.
We want to hear it, Shirley.
Well, like I said, you're recording this time. I sat down and I looked at him. He was about like from here to you to me, and I said, and I'm going to tell you right now, don't harp on me about smoking because I'm not going to quit.
I was sitting closer to her because I remember feeling the wind of that finger wagging in my face.
And after that, we got along just fine. He never once mentioned cigarettes to me, but I wish I'd listened to him because a few years later, I got lung cancer.
Oh, no.
First, I had the triple aneurysm, and then I got lung cancer. And I said, well, I wish I'd listened to you now, doctor, but I didn't.
Well, I made Shirley a deal that day. I promised her, because I liked her right away. So I promised her that I wouldn't harp on her about the smoking so long as she allowed me once a year to go over the conditions that I'm most worried about and what the symptoms might be. And it just so happened that one of the symptoms I told her about was the possibility of an aneurysm, what we call an abdominal aortic aneurysm. And I said, well, it could present like this if it's expanding and even rupturing. And then one day I got an emergency call from her to the office saying, do you remember those things you told me? They're happening right now. And so I think that was probably the time, if anything, that we saw her life saved.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Got her down.
He wouldn't even let me go home. I said, well, can I go home first? And because he wanted me to go to Ford Hospital. You had somebody else come in and look at me, too. And
while here in Midland, and we determined you needed Henry Ford.
So he said, no, you're not going home. I'm calling an ambulance.
And do you remember what else I did? I sat on your bedside with all your kids around, and I said, I'm breaking my promise. You're quitting smoking.
I did, too.
And from that moment, she's never smoked again.
Well, good for you. That's a hard thing to stop suddenly, too. That's
right.
But, yeah, that sounds like something where there's a catalyst there to kick you in the butt to do it, too. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, over time, too, though, like your relationship has shifted a little bit more. It's still a doctor-patient relationship, but this has shifted a bit, and now it's a little bit different as support.
More like a mother-son now.
More like a mother-son. Tell me more about this.
I tell him what to do. I tell him what I'm going to do and what he's going to do. He's a pretty good son. He listens to me.
So how did this start, though? How did the relationship start to change? Because it's...
I don't know. Just over the years, I loved him right off the bat. You know, he was more than a doctor to me, right from the word go. I guess because he did listen to me. I like people to mind, obey.
I think that experience with the aneurysm, I think that deepened things pretty quick.
Sure.
When I had lung cancer,
correct.
And he said, you got stage 4 inoperable lung cancer. And I said, well, I'm not going to do nothing, doctor. I said, I'm old and I'm ready to die, so I'm not going to do nothing. And he said, oh, yes, you are. And again, he called in the kids. I forget what all you did say to them.
Well, we had a meeting, right? And
right.
So one of the things I believe in is listening. So I said, Shirley, are you sure you don't want to do anything? And she goes, well, I talk about that, doctor, but I don't know. You know, and with her family around, I think that was a very emotional conversation. Because the kids are looking at her going, does this absolutely mean the end?
And they don't dare cross me.
So they're like looking at me going, you do it. So we talked, and I said, I don't think that this has to mean the end. So we talked that day, and she looked at me and said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, because I can only speak for myself, I guess in your case, I need 24 hours. She goes, what are you going to do with those 24 hours? I said, I want to go pray about it.
I remember that.
I need to make the best informed decision I possibly can. And I can bring only so much medical to this, but I need a little bit more help than that. So I did. I went home that night and prayed quite a bit about it. And the impression that I got was, you don't get to make a final decision with someone else's life. I knew that. But the impression was, counsel with Shirley, and if she's agreeable, encourage her to go through the treatments. So, Shirley talks about me listening, but really she's a good listener too. And so she said, are you sure, doctor? And I said, no, I'm not, but I know what I felt and I know what I feel.
Right.
And her kids were very, I think,
wanted me to do it.
Yeah, they very much wanted her to do it. So we embarked on chemotherapy and radiation.
Took 6 months of chemo and radiation. Never was sick a day.
Yeah, lost her hair, but she looked good with no hair.
It goes back.
It grew back real nice. So I think to answer those questions, there was just some depth of relationship that came out of this that transitioned it from more of just a transactional relationship to one of deep caring and familiar.
I knew he cared.
Yeah.
That was, the main thing. I tell him now. I try to do what he tells me to do, but he wants some stuff that I'm not going to do.
You don't want to go with there, do you, Shirley?
No, I don't want to go there.
Fair enough.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, so.
But recently, it's not just a relationship between the two of you now. Your wife Heather has been involved too. So
she was a godsend to me.
So to speak more to that too. So first and foremost, how did Heather get involved? And I think Dr. Savage, you can maybe speak to this. And then what is the relationship with Heather? What is that relationship like? And how is it helping you?
Oh. Well, so I'll start maybe by saying how it came about. So COVID hit, right? 15 months ago now. Mm-hmm. And I think shortly into that, when everything was shutting down, I think it's safe to say Shirley's social network now had gone like the rest of our lives. It had gone virtual.
Right.
It had gone remote. Church closed down. Family visits closed down. What's that?
Not for me, they didn't. I snuck them in the back door.
You did, but even then you said that the kids were worried about visiting you because they were worried about passing stuff on to you.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that she once enjoyed, I think you liked different games and so forth.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't do nothing there.
All went away. And so I was watching her, I don't want to speak for her, but spiral emotionally.
I did.
Every time I would see her, I could tell that the visit to the office was like her social highlight maybe of the month. That worried me. And so I'd always greet her with a big hug. And we'd talk. And so at one point I was talking to one of my friends and colleagues at the office who's a care manager. Her name is Kathy Brzezinski. And I said, Kathy, I'm concerned about Shirley. We're getting into dangerous places with her, and we got to think outside the box. So one day I proposed, I said to Kathy, what would you think? Would it be too weird if I actually introduced my wife to her? Because Heather's very social. She goes, I don't know. Is that something you think is good? And I said, I just think we ought to try something different. So I proposed it, and Shirley was like, well, fine, doctor. If you're married to her, she's got to be a good woman. And so I made the connection. And I think did she call you first? Is that how that played out?
Yes.
Did you call me, Heather?
Yes.
I don't know, but she was a godsend to me. I know that.
Yep. And so those two began to have kind of the closer relationship. And
during post-COVID now.
Yeah. And even during COVID.
Yeah, during COVID, I called her, introduced myself, and basically said, "Hey, can I come see you? I'd like to meet you." You know the story. I told her, Sasha told me that you might want someone to come visit you. Well, I have some time. So I went over, and then I started bringing, my kids came with me, my 3 that are still at home. So we only have 3 at home now. So they came, and it's funny now. I'm going to fast forward a minute.
That's all right.
Now, if I go see Shirley without my little ones, they go, "Oh, well, we wanted to go see Shirley." And yeah, they love Shirley. So that's been a sweet little thing. My 16-year-old daughter calls her already her Midland grandma.
Aww.
So, and I know my 2 little ones just think she's hilarious, and she gives them food too. So that's
Look at this, win-win.
always helpful.
How often do you see each other?
At least 2 or 3 times a month, at least.
Yeah,
and
I was trying to
sometimes
do.
more.
Yeah, I was trying to do like once a week. I'd go on a Sunday, or I even went weekday.
Yeah,
and you
you
had
went,
another friend there. We had lunch on her
Oh, yeah, that was so good.
patio, whatever that's called.
Yeah. And then they had them singers, and we all... Yeah.
Yes, so I am one of the leaders of our youth group, the teenage girls. And so I asked Shirley at one point, "Hey, I have all these girls, and they would love to meet you too, and they like to do things like get together and sing. What would you think of that?" And what did you say, Shirley?
I said, "I'd love it.
Yes.
Bring them on."
So we first time we went over, it was still COVID rules, so a bunch of us still had our masks on, which Shirley said, "You guys need to take your masks off. I can't see your faces." So some of us did take our masks off.
That one wouldn't, though. Would
No,
she?
she wouldn't. She was pretty firm. She flashed you her smile and then put it back
Right.
up. Yeah. But we went over on a Sunday afternoon and sang a bunch of gospel hymns and songs that we knew, and then different elderly residents
Right,
there.
came out and
they
listened.
started coming out and listening to
In
us.
fact, they were
So
there just Sunday. They were there, and we had quite a few out Sunday.
Yes.
4 of them out.
4 of them came
When
out. They set up their chairs. I'm like, oh, now it's like a concert.
a
We were going to be
stage.
done. I'm like, well,
But
now
then
we
they
need
were
to sing a
hanging-
few more.
They were hanging over the
Yes, we
balcony,
heard clapping from up above, and so we went and saw. They were like hanging over the,
listening to.
yes, on the
That
second
was
floor.
great. That's great.
So,
Well,
anyway.
very cool. And we're going to dig deeper into that relationship and how it's benefited you, Shirley, and the impact it's had on you. But first, can you talk to me a little bit more about what it's like living at the apartments? During COVID, it wasn't nearly, you don't have that social outlet.
No, you couldn't go out in the hall or nothing. And of course, I wouldn't wear a mask. And if you go out in the hall and stuff you couldn't go out in the hall without a mask. So I said, okay, I'll stay in my room. I don't care. I'm not going to wear that mask. And so I didn't.
So during a COVID especially, you're in your room a lot more, not in the hallways, not having those
Right,
social
you have
times.
no-
Were there times that you felt a little lonely or isolated?
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. That's where Heather came in.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, what helps you during these times?
When she calls and says, I'm coming over, that makes my day. I think, good. I got something to look forward to today.
And we've had some excellent conversations. I feel like we have so much in common.
We do.
And we laugh that we have so much in common. And one of the things in common is Dr. Savage. And that we both get on his nerves a fair amount.
I can see him in the
he
middle,
gets-
just like looking his head down, going, yeah, they're right here.
Yep.
Because he can't control either one of us.
That's so funny. Do you think other people in your apartment are feeling similarly, especially
Oh, yeah, about the food.
about the food? Yeah.
Everybody complains.
Besides the food, do you think the feelings of get kind of isolated, especially during COVID? I mean, normally, do you think that those feelings of loneliness and isolation are also there outside of COVID, or do you think that there's enough social?
Sometimes I get real, especially in the evening. If I go out in the hall and there's nobody out there, it's like, ooh, this is weird. Weird, You just feel like I'm the only one in the world. But if there's people, sometimes they'll gather out there at the tables now and talk and visit, and A lot of them will put a puzzle on the table and they work. Now, they all go upstairs and play cards. I don't play cards because I'd probably fight them. So I don't play cards. But they do go upstairs and play cards. They have something going every day. Like they play cornhole, they play bocce ball, they play cards. Then there's pastors that come in, Catholic, and they have, what do they call it?
Communion.
Something, yeah, I don't know. So there's something going every day there.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
But it was probably extra hard during COVID when there's things weren't happening.
Nothing going, absolutely nothing.
So, Dr. Savage, I'm going to turn to you now.
Yeah,
so,
you bet.
speaking in these times, like thinking about feelings of loneliness and isolation, especially during COVID times, but other times it may be there some too in the evenings, like you said, Shirley. So, how does this impact somebody's health? Like these feelings of isolation and loneliness first. Like, how does that impact somebody's health? And then, how do medical professionals typically treat issues of loneliness or give or advise or patients when you can recognize something? It's like, so speak to that a little bit.
So we know that loneliness is actually a real negative on people's health. It has a tendency toward depression, and depression carries with it pretty significant adverse health consequences. I could list off a whole number of them, but I don't know that that's what you're looking for. It's very powerful in its negative effect on people. So you can imagine when COVID hit, we were watching loneliness skyrocket. How do we treat it? Unfortunately, not very well, because the reality is what you need to be able to treat loneliness. You can treat depression, but loneliness is a whole other animal, right? To be able to treat that, you kind of got to think outside the box. And healthcare providers, we're best many times at kind of looking and saying, hey, is there a medication I can give you or, a service that I can render for you? But the services aren't usually, hey, can we connect you with a friend?
Right.
We're getting better at this now. I'm proud that in healthcare we're starting to see that there's a much better way to deliver care in general to people, a much more holistic approach, but it takes an entire community to do that. So we're in the process of learning that and trying things out, and I'm just stubborn enough and maybe impatient enough that, like in Shirley's case, because we were close and because we'd walked really through 2 life-changing events together, I figured she would probably let me test drive something. And so I felt comfortable enough with her, knew all of her kids. Heavens, I took care of some of her grandkids. And so I knew that they would support me in doing that. And so I kind of went off script with the idea of introducing my family to her. I don't know that that's scalable across a society, but I think it might be. So I've tried to share these ideas with a bunch of different organizations about how do you leverage your employed workforce to donate time in the community? How do you make, dare I say, assigned friends and stick with it? I think that's a concept that has been only very, very little touched on. But, Shirley essentially was my assigned friend, right? She looked at me as a doc. I looked at her as a patient. And we saw enough that we liked about each other. There was nothing natural that brought our relationship together. It was more out of transactional situations. And a lot of people do not pursue relationships because they're like, well, if it's transactional, it's not real. I challenge that. I don't think there's anything that if it brings 2 people together can't change and develop into a real meaning relationship.
Look at the laughter and friendship that's developed between you and her and Heather and the family. So from this transaction, it's made really life-altering relationships.
All my kids, when I die, you let Dr. Savage know. I want him to my funeral.
Oh, I would be there. One of my beliefs is that we as a society can actually do this better, and it doesn't cost more money. And it doesn't require gigantic organizations. It literally can be as small as everybody. Have you heard the starfish story, right?
I don't think I have. I need to hear it.
So just quick story. So one of my favorite, a boy was walking on a beach somewhere along the ocean after a storm. And the storm had washed in literally tens of thousands of starfish. And he would walk along the beach and he would get one of these starfish and he'd look at it and he'd throw it back into the water. Well, along came an older gentleman and he looked at the boy and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm saving the starfish." And the man said, "Look up and down this beach. There are tens of thousands of starfish. You can't possibly believe that you are making a difference." And the boy picked up a starfish and he looked at it. He looked at the man, looked back, tossed it in the water. He said, "Well, I made a difference for that one." So I have this vision, I guess, that maybe is starting with me as the boy on the beach, that if you can just reach out to one person, and imagine if 10,000 people reached out to one person, everyone has time to be friends with someone new. Build a new friendship and begin the friendship deliberately. It can even be transactional, right? Start and say, "Hey, I know you don't know me and I don't know you, but let's be friends." I've got some of my closest friends now that very way, and I'm grateful for it. So very long answer to your question, but in medicine, we have not done this well. I don't think medicine is the answer, but in this case, it was medicine that brought two people together and then made a connection to a third and a fourth and a fifth and a 20th that I think has at least brought some joy to Shirley.
Yes, it definitely has.
Yeah, Shirley, talk to me about what has the impact been for you? Like, how did you feel before you connected to Heather, and then how do you feel after?
Well, naturally, you just feel alone when you got, all I had was my kids, you know. I'm not very outgoing. Don't even comment. I'm not very outgoing, and, you know, I could have cared less about them people in that building, whether they talked to me or not. Didn't matter to me one way or another. So when Heather came, she's so much like me, and she's so full of life, and she's so loving. You know, it just changed my whole life. It really did.
That's amazing to hear. And Heather, how about you? What has the impact been on for you and your family as well?
First of all, I'm trying not to get teary. The impact on me. Well, I am, so Shirley says she's not, what did you say, social, outgoing? I am one of the most outgoing people that I know, which is probably why Sasha felt comfortable to say, "Hey, Heather, call this patient of mine.
Sure.
You'll love her." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so it was an easy step for me. I did not know where it would lead to, but as I have gotten to know her more, we have laughed together, we have cried together. I brought my kids to see her because I told them, "You guys have to meet Shirley." And now they ask me, "Are we going to go see Shirley today?" You know, pretty much every Sunday. "Are we going to go sing to Shirley? We're going to go visit with her." I think it sends a message to my children, and now even the girls that I'm one of the leaders to in our church.
They like me too.
They love you. And I think it's sending a message that there's more we can be doing. Mm-hmm. There's more we can be doing, and it's not hard to do. And it really is about people. At the end of the day, it's about the people.
It's about that relationship
on
building.
this earth. Yes.
You see, through her, I met all those other people too. Her ones that she brings, I love them all, you know.
And think about the impact, too, that you're making on the other people living with you, too. I mean, you talked about their clapping as you're singing.
Well, my brain goes to, here I have these teenage girls and my kids, and more people are coming out in the hallway to watch. And I think maybe one of these girls will say, "I'm going to head over there just on my own and visit people that are sitting in the hallway." That would be awesome. That's my bigger vision. To say, look how easy this is. And look, like we met your neighbor that's 98 years old. And Shirley said, "See her over there? She's 98. And I had to go say hi to her. And she had the most giant smile on her face. Sweetest lady.
Sharp as a
thought
tack.
I wouldn't have met her either. I can't wait to go back and maybe she'll pop out again to see us. But
Oh, they will, because they all like Jai. That's all I heard.
It just opened
Why do
up
they?
this whole new world for me, and hopefully for these other girls that
I don't know about you, but it gives me hope to maybe give fruition to Dr. Savage, your idea of making these systemic changes, right, to practices to give better care in a different way. So if we can see that, like, stemming from this one relationship, the amount of people who've been impacted from
yes,
it,
yes.
how can we? Is there ways we can replicate this? Is there ways that we can support more? Is there
Yeah.
ways that we can do more to build those relationships? And it can start with transactional, but where does it go from there?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of those answers are going to emerge, but I think that they're as simple as just reach out and befriend somebody. You know, Shirley and I, dare I say, I think if you plumbed the depths of both of us, what you would learn on the surface is that she and I are actually quite different. We're actually very different. I don't think that, for example, if I'm very transparent, I don't think politically that we align. There are a lot of things that, you know, she and I think that are very radically different. Unfortunately, in our world, that's, I think, what society focuses on a lot. And it's easy when you don't go deep to polarize. Mm-hmm. But like I said, if you plumb the depths of us, maybe the three of us sitting here, I think we're representative of probably all of humanity. We are so much more alike than what we ever are different, that I think maybe one of my biggest hopes is that relationships like this can be examples to people of, you don't have to think the same way to love somebody. And you certainly don't even have to, you know, align with their belief systems to let them know you care. Shirley was joking earlier, right? There are some things I want from her that she won't give to me, so to say. You know, that relate to certain treatments and therapies that I wish that, you know, she and I could agree upon. But at the end of the day, even those things are not what make the big difference.
Sure.
The big difference here is when Shirley shows up in my office, she knows she's coming to see a friend, and I know I'm seeing one.
I like to strut through, too, because they know he likes me.
Yeah. And she does. Everybody knows when Shirley shows up. And we always greet each other with a big hug, no matter what. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but even during COVID, we had our masks on, right? But I knew what she needed was a hug.
Right.
Right.
And I knew what she needed was my friendship. And so there wasn't any way I was going to withhold that.
That was the same with the preschoolers, by the way.
Yeah. So we just, I truly believe that the world right now, and I sure hope I don't sound like I'm on a soapbox, but the world right now just really needs people to put off what we think is different and stop talking about what we hate or don't like about each other, and instead talk about our common ground. And I know how simple that sounds and how often it's said, but in our case, a very deep, meaningful relationship has developed in exactly that way.
But I liked you the first time I seen you.
And I liked you too.
Because, I don't know, there was just something about you that, you know, there really was just something about you that I liked. Of course, Brian had told me a lot about you, you know, because he liked you too. So
I'll share one more analogy.
Sure,
Can I?
please do.
I don't get to claim ownership of this. So when we were at church on Sunday, a person was visiting our congregation, a local leader, and he stood up at the pulpit and he said something that just took my breath away. He said, "I'm a musical guy." He has directed dozens of fairly high-profile musicals in Saginaw. And he said, one of the things that touches my soul is music. He was talking about how he flew out west to watch a cousin perform in Newsies. And he said there's this one part where there's this ensemble of different people all singing harmony in their parts. And he said, it moved me to tears. And he said, what moved me to tears is that the very concept of harmony demands difference. You cannot sing harmony by all singing the same notes. What is beautiful is the divergence of the voices that align into one song. And he said, when it is done well, it's magical. And that really, so this was just 2 days ago? That impressed me incredibly. And so maybe we're only an ensemble of 3, or if you had our 3 kids that are still at home, that's 6, and then all these other girls and some of the folks that live there. But when you start bringing your different piece to the ensemble, it's better. That's one of my takeaways from, I guess, what has happened here is that we're not alike in so many of the ways that the world looks at. But in so many other ways, we bring our differences together and they make us all better.
Love to hear it. And I would argue too, it's like you say, it's the 3 of you in this creating this harmony, but I think the ripple effect that you've made is really noticeable too, like that to your kids too, and to our listeners, I hope too, to like this, hope this impacts others and, you know, serves as a catalyst for them to reach out to somebody, make friends with them and create that relationship.
Yep.
I'm going to ask all of you now as we close out today. I'll start with you, Shirley, and we'll move this way. What would your final message to our listeners be today? I mean, I appreciate all the story of your relationship and how it's made such an impact. But what would your final listeners today be?
Say, I just don't give up, you know. It's so easy. There's many times where I want to just think, hey, I don't care. I want to die, you know. But you can't think that way. Don't give up. Get up every morning, trust in God to take you through the day and to solve your problems for you, and go out and enjoy life because you don't know if tomorrow's coming.
That's very true. Dr. Savage, how about you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I'll probably land on open your ears and your heart. If you'll listen to the divergence of the people in the ensemble, I'll use that analogy. Wow, what you find moves you, and friendship comes out of it. So, yeah, that would be my message and the thing I've probably learned most.
Absolutely. And Heather, how about you?
Aside from what they just said, I would say it doesn't have to be hard. And it doesn't have to be some giant thing. Like, I never bring Shirley any gifts. I brought her banana bread once, I think. But I don't bring anything to her. We hardly prepare the songs that we're doing. We kind of just wing it, because I think if you start overthinking it, you can talk yourself out of it pretty quickly.
Sure.
And it can just be easy. It doesn't have to be difficult.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here today, and I just want to say it's been wonderful getting to know you all, the 3 of you, better, and it's amazing to see how much love and warmth there is in this relationship. And as you said, it started out with this transactional relationship, but really there's a lot of love there, and I can see it and I can feel it, and I'm sure our listeners can too. So thank you all for being here today and sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You can stay connected with the Visibility Project by subscribing, liking, and sharing on your favorite podcasting and social apps. Look for us at the Visibility PRJ.
Financial support is needed to keep the conversation going. Go to midlandfoundation.org/give and select the Cultural Awareness Coalition Endowment Fund to be part of the project. Note podcast in your donation notes.
Thank you for listening.
We see you.
We hear you.
And together, we are making a difference.